Welcome to the Masters of Healthcare Innovation podcast sessions. I'm your host, Tim Radersdorf, Chief Innovation Officer at The Ohio State University College of Nursing and an avid curator of curiosity. The Masters of Healthcare Innovation podcast sessions are comprised of short discussions with innovators who push beyond boundaries and lead their organizations to great heights in healthcare and beyond. Each session focuses on a specific concept of innovation and how these leaders have either used them to their success or learned how to better harness their power in the future. So put on your curiosity goggles and let's jump on in. All right, everyone. Tim Radersdorf here, Chief Innovation Officer at the Ohio State University College of Nursing, and I have the pleasure to be speaking with social entrepreneur and healthcare executive management consultant, Mr. Tim Simmard. And Tim and I were actually at a conference this last summer, and it was mostly focused on nursing entrepreneurship from the nurse practitioner standpoint. So we're going to focus a little bit on a nursing specific initiative here. But Tim, can you talk about nurse-led clinics as a concept and what you're seeing at a local level in Massachusetts and then maybe nationwide as we look to maybe expand upon this core, or not this framework that's been around for a long time, but hasn't really seemed to get the momentum that it needs to be successful.
So again, I'm not a clinician, so take this for what it's worth. But
that's one of the best things about this, though, Tim, is to be having someone who's not a clinician and not a nurse, validating that there is this need, and that someone with as much business experience of you saying there's got to be methods to make this work. So we very much appreciate that component.
Sure. So I'll kind of give you my 20,000 foot level view. Okay. So we all know what the triple aim is. Access, quality, safety, cost, kind of things. When we look at those megatrends I mentioned earlier, which are that, there's an aging population, there's increased demand for care, and that, at the same point in time, there's going to be less doctors, less nurses, less clinicians, practitioners available. So there's going to be this imbalance of supply and demand. When you think in that context, and some people say there's 100,000, 200,000, whatever the number is that we're going to need in terms of physicians in the next 5 to 10 years, and nurses, that you can look at the workforce management numbers. They're clearly out there, but there's not enough of them that we know. So access to care is a critical issue. Access to care is a critical issue without ignoring any of the other aspects, including cost, quality, and safety. But the observation is that nurse practitioners, there's 3,500 nurses, 3,500,000 nurses, between 3 and 4 million nurses in the U.S. today. I hear various numbers. I'm still looking for a real number.
Yeah, it's hard to find.
So anyways, they're the largest professional clinical workforce in healthcare. I guess I'm speaking to nurses for the most part, are the largest demographic in the workforce for healthcare. And when we start thinking about nurse practitioner, and everyone is getting smarter and smarter, they're going to school and it's becoming more available, and with online and so on, it makes total sense for the nurse profession to evolve and to gain greater responsibility for patient care. And nurse practitioners are at the forefront of this. And I suspect that if you think about it, 20 years ago, I don't know when they started, PAs didn't exist, scribes didn't exist. So I think based on this pressure for greater access to care, professionals in particular, and having people work at the top of their license is going to drive new designations of professionals. So there may be a nurse practitioner plus one or something like that, whatever that name is, something between the PA and the nurse practitioner. There's going to be greater granularity based on licensure, is what I suspect in the next 10 years. So getting back out of the abstract kind of thing and into the practical, nurse practitioners have autonomy right now in 17 states, I think it is, Tim.
22, actually.
Oh, is it 22? There you go. See, I can't keep up with the numbers.
It's all good.
Those are the smart states. There is, evidence, clear evidence, and it's going to be coming out if it's not already. I don't know if Wendy's published it or not, that shows nurse practitioners, and I just read a study coming out of the UK that says nurse practitioners, their equivalent, have better outcomes, greater satisfaction, patient satisfaction, at lower cost than MD-led practices or clinics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may get me in trouble, you guys, but this is what the studies say. And so it makes no sense that we wouldn't be making the idea of having nurses have their own patient cohort, their patient panels. It makes no sense that we wouldn't enable them and empower them and make it easy for nurse practitioners to open up their own clinics. There are clearly, this federal, state, and then payer guidelines, restrictions, whatever you want to call it, regulations around whether, can a nurse practitioner bill directly with an MPI? That's a payer call. And what we found out the other day is that they can't do it as a nurse practitioner, but they can do it as a specialty. But get away from that for a moment. The idea here is that there's not enough doctors. So many doctors are not taking patients. When we start talking about the disenfranchised, we talk about the the patient population are underserved. It becomes even more startling why we don't allow for nurses to manage their own patient panel and manage their own practices. They are the most collaborative, caring group of people, professionals, and spend more time with the patients. So we talk even more, not just about the business side of it, the access side of it, but truly the patient care aspect. Seems to me, not always, but seems to me, from my perspective, that it's even more impactful when it comes to engaging patients, and becomes more impactful when we talk about patients being self-managed when it comes to chronic illnesses or chronic diseases. There's just a lot of quality aspects that we're still not even capturing. Those are just not, maybe they're speculation, but I think they're well-founded. And why aren't we supporting more of these advanced nursing-led clinics or practices? It's a quandary for me, but I hope we can help empower nurses to do that more. And I think we have to create some frameworks and some opportunities around doing that.
And can you talk a little bit about the new, I think you said $52 billion.
So the CMS awarded state of Massachusetts, which is like 98% insured, due to Mitt Romney's kind of early ACA healthcare legislation. So CMS gave, I think it's a 5-year program. CMS awarded the state of Massachusetts $52.4 billion to create an innovative program around Medicaid patient population. We have 1.9 million people, 1 in 5, I think it is, in the state of Massachusetts that are on Medicaid. And they've instituted, or starting to institute, 18, I think it is, ACOs, an ACO program around the Medicaid patient population. Now, there's a lot of, and why, state of Massachusetts has a supervisory state relative to nurse practitioners having their own practice. In other words, doctors have to, basically sign off on care and supervise nurses. And there's been legislation since 2014 here in Massachusetts that never got passed. So I'll come back to that in a second. Again, the legislative aspects and basically the true business competitive aspect of healthcare in a moment. But so these ACOs are institutionalized. They're being formed to support this 1.9 million patient population. And again, with Medicaid expansion, it's either great, even getting larger in many states. And it's key. I mean, there's a recent study that says Medicaid can be better than private insurance. So the point here is that why we don't have nurse-led practices or clinics to support these ACOs. I understand it business-wise, but I don't understand why they aren't being incorporated, particularly with this this particular cohort.
So talk a little bit about that from the business standpoint. Why do you see that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pure competition. It's a competitive marketplace. So you have payers that have practices and clinics, and you have doctors who look at that as their domain. Physicians look at that as their domain. Potentially they have, some argument around patient safety, and whether NPs are adequately trained. I mean, some of this stuff is out there in terms of papers and studies and opinions in many cases. But it's a competitive marketplace, and there's no better way than to alleviate competition than to regulate it as not available.
Yeah. Great point, and a very frustrating one for those who are looking to improve the triple aim and access to care from the nurse practitioner standard. And
for an underserved population, Tim, an underserved population, but it is what it is. There's different constituencies. We all know it's a zero-sum game to some degree in healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Masters of Healthcare Innovation podcast sessions. I'm your host, Tim Radersdorf. For more information about the MHI program, visit mhi.osu.edu. Many thanks, and be curious.